Thunderbirds, do they exist? I don't know. I've never seen a Mothman or a Thunderbird, but boy, there's been a lot of reports lately of Mothman and Thunderbirds all across the country. It's just like it's like every day almost you hear about it. Anyway, we'll be back in 2.5 minutes. We'll have James Kirschbaum on to wrap up the rest of the show. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
I gaze upon the annals of time, one thing that comes through: we are not alone in this universe. It's a thought that rings true. Ancient cave dwellers drew spacecraft on the walls. It's a recurring. I've seen the same thing while walking late at night, and I know it's not a dream.
From Malmstrom to Manhattan, Boston to LA, there are people asking questions and they will not go away. But what has been seen might not be what it seems. The government's shadows dance in the sea.
Tell the truth, they will ridicule everything you say and do. It's all part of a deception. It's a puppet master's tool. And I've seen those craft shut down up the silos from 10 miles away. And there ain't nothing that the Pentagon can do. They can't make them go away.
From Malmstrom to Manhattan, Boston to LA, there are people asking questions and they will not go away. But what has been seen might not be what it seems. The government's shadows dance in the sea. From Malmstrom to Manhattan, New York to LA, you can't get the picture if they're pale or they're gray. But what we have seen might not be what it seems when the government's shadows dance in the sea.
There are competing agendas to determine mankind's fate. Their influence here for millions of years, all part of a cosmic state.
You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, from our compound to you worldwide, with your host, Gary Anderson.
Hey, that is me. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark. And I'll tell you, I don't know how many people like the new hours, the 3-hour format. To me, it sure beats doing a 1 hour or 2 hour show. It's a little hard sometimes to keep it going, but we try our best. Now, tomorrow, we got a great guest back who hasn't been on for about a year. We have Chad Meek. Now, Chad Meek, his grandfather actually had a place to live. It was called Big Rock. And it was very famous, in the 40s of UFOs as one of the major hotspots in the whole world for UFOs. Howard Hughes was actually involved in some of the funding to create a little chapel for people could go there and watch UFOs. But what's interesting about Chad's grandfather, he kind of made a house in this big, huge, big rock, and he lived in it. And he was very much into UFOs and stuff like that. This is during like the wartime. And evidently, because he also had some radio equipment in there, some of the people thought maybe this guy was a Nazi spy. So the police came in there and tried to order him out of his house into this, big rock. And he refused to come out. So they shot in some tear gas and stuff like that, which actually ignited some TNT, which he had in there, because that's how he was kind of blowing up the big rock, to expand his little home. Kind of blew him up to nothing. But it's going to be an interesting show tomorrow when he's on, because we're going to be talking about UFOs and, how Howard Hughes even got involved into it. It's going to be very, very interesting. I mean, the thing about UFOs actually goes back a lot farther than people even imagine. And it hasn't stopped. And it seems like now it's being more accepted by the population than ever. And the reports, like coming in from the UFO Reporting Center, is getting, more and more. And it's actually even reports of people calling up and reporting seeing aliens walking on the ground. I don't know what's going on. I did have some type of encounter myself years and years ago up in the desert in New Mexico. I don't know if it's a UFO, but it certainly wasn't a helicopter. A huge bright light lit up at the side of the car. Me and my wife at the time, we freaked out. I pulled over and I thought, oh, maybe this is a helicopter, because the speed limit was drastically high at that time, and I was driving my GTO as fast as I could. So I pull off the side of the road. I get out of the car expecting to be arrested or something, and guess what? There was no sound. There was nothing there, but this big bright light was there, and then that light disappeared instantly. Poof, it was gone. So that's the encounter I've had. I've had 3 encounters with the paranormal all my life. A little kid, the shadow person coming out of my grandmother's closet, then followed up by, I think, a UFO in the New Mexico desert, and whatever, a hairy man or whatever, maybe a draft dodger left over from Vietnam living up in the Canadian Rockies at that old prison camp. I don't know. Hey, James, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, and I got to ask you, that experience with the shadow person going to the closet, is that where you first learned to hide under the covers?
You know what? It's true. I did hide. And you know what? It's funny. If I hear a funny crashing sound or, on a half asleep at night, I still to this day have a tendency of taking the blanket and pulling it over my head. Like it's going to protect me, isn't it?
Well, it's worked this long, so why change now?
It's just like some of these old gory movies, I mean, you put a blanket over your head and then they still stab you with that spear. I mean, you just don't see it coming.
You don't see it coming, but mentally you feel safer and better, even though it doesn't work.
And another thing I have this phobia with, at nighttime, when the lights are out and stuff, I won't reach under the bed. Tell me why I won't do that.
Well, that's because the monster under there will grab you and pull you under there with them, and you definitely don't want that.
I think it's, I think it's brainwashing from when I was a little kid. All those horror movies and all that stuff. You grow up to all that stuff, and how many people out there, seriously, would like to stick their hand under their bed late at night?
Well, I can go one further. You don't stick your leg off the edge of the bed either, because something will grab it.
Okay, do you have that phobia?
No, nothing bothers me. I've had them. You kidding me? I've had them wake me up, spirits and stuff, until I got a grip on things. How would you like that? For a week straight, spirits waking you up, not letting you sleep, and bugging you. And that was bizarre. That was a bizarre time of my life, but I got through it.
Now you weren't drinking MD 2020 or something, were you?
No, but it was about to drive me to drink, and that would have been worse because then I would have been drunk and trying to sleep and not been able to sleep. No, I wasn't drinking.
Yeah, I don't know. It scares me because I do think there is things out there that we don't know about, and until you can prove that they either exist or don't exist. My mom and dad used to say, hey, there's no such thing as the boogeyman, but I don't know.
Well, here's the thing about that. Your belief system won't help you from the truth. So keep that in mind. Just because you don't believe in something doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Oh, yeah. I believe in leprechauns. What do you think?
Who am I to argue with that? Gee, well, I'll tell you, I would like to find her pot of gold.
No, you don't want to do that. I saw that movie where this group of young people stole the pot of gold, and that leprechaun became really angry and mean. And then, it started killing them one at a time in a horrible way.
Yeah, and it took like 7 or 8 movies to finally get that story beaten into people's head. Oh. Yeah,
I think they killed the leprechaun finally, I think. But you never know. Maybe in another 2 years from now, they'll have another sequel.
You never know. And with them leprechauns, there's all kind of things like banshees and all kind of lores of little people and things going on.
Well, Sam, has that little station up there and, up in the Cascades, and that little community around 200 and some people claim that she sees these little people. And I really do think they exist. Again, maybe it's just me, but we don't know about aliens, do we? We don't know how big they are. They could be huge. They could be 30 feet tall, 40 feet tall, or they could be 3 inches tall, depending on what solar system, what galaxy they came from, or who knows. But, people are seeing, Mary Joyce, even in North Carolina, back 10 years ago when they were building the new community college, they dug up skeletons, humanoid skeletons that were like about 6 inches tall.
Oh, my. Yeah, you bring up a good point because depending on the planet's the gravity level, that has a lot to do with the size of creatures. So, if you're on a big planet with a lot of gravity compared to a planet like ours or even a smaller planet, the size of the being is going to be different. It's going to be determined by the gravity of the planet, I would think anyway.
And oxygen level, because I have talked to a couple of scientists. I said, could they bring back a full-size dinosaur? And they said they couldn't, because the oxygen content back when the dinosaurs were roaming was so much more rich compared to what it is now that it would not support their size.
Right, you're correct. There was percentage-wise, it was a lot more oxygen. I think today it's like 22% roughly, give or take, of oxygen, and the rest is nitrogen and 2% of whatever. And I think back then it was a lot more percentage-wise, oxygen-wise. It would have to be, because can you imagine the lungs of a beast that's 100 feet long? Hell, their lungs would be bigger than we are.
Oh yeah, and that's what I'm saying. But again, so we get these reports of like little people. I do believe they exist. But again, until they actually catch one, like Bigfoot, they haven't caught one yet. Till they actually catch one, you can sit there and people can say, "I seen it." But, somebody needs to either put one in a jar or bag a Bigfoot. I hate to say it.
Right. And, that's like the silverback gorilla. For years, people would spot them, and I don't think they were discovered till, the 1930s or something. And a lot of people thought it was myth, People were seeing them until they finally caught one and documented it.
Yeah, and you know what's going on now with the Earth's magnetic field changing? People, like we were talking about earlier in the show, they're seeing birds that they normally haven't seen in their area, and they're getting them confused with prehistoric type animals and stuff like that. I think it's really strange. Just like where I'm at, I haven't had an owl on my property probably in about 18 years, and all of a sudden now I got at least 2 or 3 out on my property. And that's kind of, eerie.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, because that magnetic field, I believe it may alter the bird's internal clock. So when it does that, it throws them off. There was a case, I don't know, a few years ago in Alabama where thousands of blackbirds just died, and I think that was one of the reasons. And I think also with that magnetic field shifting, that's going to, who knows? I'm just saying, in theory, maybe it could open up more portals. It could definitely affect the paranormal in different areas more so than others, I would think.
Oh, yeah. And a thing, too, like porpoises, whales, sharks are beaching themselves now more than ever. And I think this has been going on for years, but I think our magnetic field has been slowly going. for years, but now it's going so drastically fast. I think it's confusing. Even, the porpoises, the whales, they losing their